Good morning, y'all. Porch Talk with Becky from Alabama. I said this before. I'm going to try to keep this as short and sweet as possible. I know I'm one. I don't necessarily like watching 10-minute videos, so I'm going to get after it so it won't be a full 10 minutes. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I turned 59 in February. And the subject, tattoos. All right. So when I was a kid, even in my early adolescence up to teenager, the only people that I knew that had tattoos then were like my military dad, granddad, uncle, and people like that. Tattoos just were not that common back in the 70s, late 70s, and 80s. And um, they weren't that common for men, and they definitely were not that common for women. And I grew up in the generation that if you weren't military and you had tattoos, you were a piece of work. Okay? Now just hear me out. Hear me out. So, and then as years continued on, there was even a lot of churches that looked down on individuals that had tattoos, and plenty churches that would hypocritically consider people that had tattoos as sorry scumbags. Let's be real and let's be honest. So with that being said, even myself was somewhat tainted by their traditions of men. Okay, so fast forward. So yesterday, we had AT&T here, and because we're switching over from Spectrum to AT&T, they've come up here and they put all that fiber optic in, and so we had a service guy up here doing the house wiring. I know I'm not saying all the correct words, but this is how I know how to say it. And we had the saleswoman sitting up here going over all the paperwork and all that. Well, the young man that was doing the wiring had a long beard. He had his hair tied back in like a ponytail bun. Obviously, he had long hair. He had big old gauges in his ear. And because I said I'm still tainted from my background, and yes, I am Christian. I'm like, you look at these people and you're like, that's not the right thing to do. Okay, don't judge a book by its cover. But I did notice his outward appearance. I had not had a conversation with him yet. But the old Becky, those thoughts do still come to our mind because we have to fight that old person day in and day out. And if you know, you know. Well, at the end of the service of them being here, we got the opportunity to talk to the young man. And we started talking about church. I even invited him because I found out he did not live very far from where I go to church. And I'm like, oh, you're close to where I go to church. Why don't you come and go? He proceeded to tell us his story. He said, I was in church when I was a young kid. And he said, and then like most of us, I fell away, got into some things I shouldn't have gotten into. He said, and then I got back on track, got my life straightened out, and decided to start going to some churches. He said, in one of the churches I went to, after, I had my beard, I'm all tatted. He says, I went there, And I can't remember if he was even stayed there long enough for the preaching part of the church service. He said the preacher came walking up to him and told him he was not welcome there. His kind was not welcomed at the church. And I'm like, are you serious? He said, so I've had some pretty rough experiences with the churches. He said, my ancestors were Irish, meaning they were Catholic. He said, so, and this was later on, he said, so I decided, he said, I'm not Catholic, but he said, I decided I would like to visit a Catholic church and find out a little bit more about Catholicism. He said, so I called up a Catholic church in Birmingham, talked to one of the priests or something like that, and told him what I was interested in. He says, well, before you come to my church, before you come into a service, you have to go through some kind of, I don't know, it was like a 6-course thing, just to be able to come into the church. He said, so yeah, I haven't had a lot of good experiences with church. And I'm like, darling, you come to our church. And I just come and just see. I said, we're not going to judge you for your beard. We're not going to judge you for your tattoos. We're not going to judge you for your gait. You just come and just see. And I said, you know, there's a lot of church people out there that judge a book by its cover. And yes, in the beginning of this, I did say, when I saw the young guy, before I even had a conversation with him, the old Becky wanted to judge. That's not right. And you know, I know personally of this one man that I'm thinking of right now that was actually kicked out of his home church because he watched TV. And when I heard that, I cried because I knew that man. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. He was kicked out of church for watching TV. And I'm like, it's so wrong. You know, there are so many hypocrites, so many so-called Christians in the churches. And I'll tell you what, those who judge have more skeletons in the closet than chickens have feathers. Yeah. So if you've had a bad church experience, I'm sorry. We all have. We all have. But God will lead you and guide you and direct you where you need to be. God does not look on the outward appearance. He looks on what's right here. You keep on going. You keep searching. And God will lead you where you need to be. And you just put your trust in Him. You forget about the church hypocrites, the so-called Christians. Don't worry about them. God will place you in a good place, just like He did for me. And I can't thank Him enough for doing everything He has done for me. Y'all, I am right here pushing 10 minutes. I didn't mean to be here this long. But, you know, do not judge a book by its cover. Let me tell you this real fast before I hit that 10-minute mark. When my son-in-law first came around, he had a sleeve. And boy, and this was a couple of years ago, boy, was he judged by so-called Christians. And I tell you right now, I love him to pieces, and he is one of the best. Do not judge a book by its cover. And if you want to find Christ, you want to find a good church, you keep praying, you keep seeking, and the Lord will open the door just like He did for me. See ya.